So this is video 2, installment 2 on John working with his dream fragment, his tub, snakes in a tub dream fragment. This morning we recorded a session of doing 5-star dream work with this dream fragment. And then I spoke with John about a method for then taking that further, taking that dream work further into the work with the labyrinth. And we're going to talk a little bit here about his process with that, just a little bit of sharing about how that went. This particular method, I'm in the process of developing 3 different methods. This particular method is in an integration. It builds off of the dream reliving, which I learned from Scott Sparrow, and I believe is based on the work of Ernest Rossi. It's also based on a method that I found in The Complete Guide to Labyrinths by Cassandra Eason. Now, she calls this a dream ritual, and she suggests that it's really helpful for working with dreams that didn't have an opportunity to finish, that felt like they were incomplete, or dreams that are recurrent, was her suggestion. I haven't used all of her suggestions. I just used a bit of that and wove that with the work that I learned through Scott. And so the intention that I really explained to John was that we really want to engage the autonomous processes that are coming up and are alive in the dream, inherent in the dream, and see what more is given, or see how it unfolds, and really form a relationship with that aspect of consciousness that's trying to emerge. Now, Cassandra Eason suggests that the Chartres labyrinth is specifically suited for doing this kind of work because its complicated nature allows for the individual to kind of unplug somewhat from the outside world and really let their unconscious, speak to them more. And I believe that there are other labyrinth experts that would expound on that more, agree with that, and so forth. She also suggested that. She really suggested just working with these 2 couple of types of dream, but I believe in taking some of her work and some of her suggestion and weaving it with the dream reliving that is usually a static process of just sitting and writing, or sitting and talking with someone, that what can evolve and develop, what we're trying to do here, is an embodied process. That brings it down by walking through the labyrinth. We're walking more, and also we're getting it into our body more, and it allows for, as John did in his walk, it allows for even embodying some of the movements that are in the dream and so forth. Also, the labyrinth itself is an energetic container, so that what I'm proposing is, and many labyrinth authorities would concur with, what I'm proposing is that energetic container then really facilitates more of a process of engaging those autonomous processes of consciousness. So we just talked about that a little bit, and this method, this particular method, this one of 3 that I'm evolving. And so what this involves is reviewing the dream, getting centered, and then imagining that as you're walking into the labyrinth, that you're actually walking into the dreamscape. And the journey in, John's particular dream didn't complete. It didn't finish. So it was a really opportunity for him to work with that, but really allowed a lot of flexibility for whatever was going to occur in it. To really use the journey in toward the center of the labyrinth as a recounting and a reliving of the dream, and imagining that you're walking through that dream scene. It's really suggested to either, if you're doing this by yourself, to make a little recording so you can kind of like retell it in the present tense, or just to jot down notes, which is what John chose to do. It was just to take this little notebook and jot down some little notes and pause as he needed to. I was sitting on the side, sort of holding the container, so to speak, and observing what he was doing, so that was kind of helpful for me to see that process unfold for him. And so then in the center, once the individual, and John got to the center, is a time to just pause and reflect and allow what's going to emerge then to come up, so that the dream can be finished, or that what has come up as you're walking a chance to speak more and evolve. And then on the way out, then to let that unfold further and to respond to it further. Now, Lauren Chartres suggests, and many other authorities say, that every labyrinth walk is unique and different. And so that's really a consciousness that we bring into this, is that when you're working with a dream in the labyrinth, that it's going to be its own unique experience, and to really allow for that. And so we went over there and we had this conversation. We did the FiveStar Dream work, and we had this conversation about the process. And we said a prayer. We said the Lord's Prayer, and I sat quietly on the side, and John walked. So, John, why don't you just tell me a little bit about how your experience unfolded for you, and some of your most powerful impressions?
Well, as you mentioned, you and I personally have done quite a bit of labyrinth work. This is the first one that we've done with this process, uniting the dreaming and the labyrinth walk itself. I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly I started to receive information almost immediately as I entered the labyrinth. I stood at the entrance, as we usually do, and set an intention and began walking, and almost immediately the labyrinth itself became alive, and I felt that the coils of the labyrinth walkway really started to appear as if it were the coils of the snake, and it almost as if the labyrinth became instantly alive. And I was starting to get psychic impressions, and sort of encouraged. We talked about the medicine cards, and that the key word for the snake was transmutation. And I started to get some information, psychic impressions, that I wasn't perhaps moving as much as I should be, that there were repeated patterns and poor choices that I was still wrestling with, and that I needed to move a little bit more. Throughout I was getting psychic impressions, and I think as we spoke about it, that it was almost as if I was getting a psychic reading from a medium or something, that psychic information was spontaneously occurring. And I was surprised by not only how quickly the information started to come to me, but by the sheer volume. That the walk in the labyrinth itself was 3 or 4 times more than the dream content in the fragment. And there were some specific messages for me, relationship to the snakes and the container and so forth. It was interesting that I got the impression of the large python, that the large python actually had a consciousness or a sentience beyond that of a reptile, and that there was some kind of recognition between the snake and myself. And I got the impression of wondering, what is the snake thinking, and what is his intention? And I say his with quotations because I got the impression that it was masculine energy in this case. But what was his intention as he was leaving the lid? And I thought that was kind of important. I also realized that the 2 snakes in the lid, there was some relationship to those 2 snakes, even though the primary relationship in the dream was with the larger of the 2. But they were the same species. They differed in size, but it seemed like there was a connection there. I did look and got some information back about the container itself also, thinking about that. And then I was sort of left with the impression that I needed to return to the scene. And I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to do once I returned, but that was the information I was given. And there was also, during the walk, a level of concern for the snakes in the container, that the container was inappropriate to house those snakes, that there was no air holes, there was no food, there was no water for the snakes. I actually, had some concern about the snakes themselves, and a message primarily for the 2 pythons to return them to their environment, their home, return them to the wild. So there was a lot of information. I think the most compelling thing was actually the labyrinth coming alive and actually moving. It was almost as if watching a snake in a container in a zoo moving through the bedding in and not being aware of where the head was, but watching the body move underneath the bedding, and that the entire labyrinth itself had come alive and was moving. So it was a really wonderful process and quite surprising.
Quite surprising, yeah. I was really surprised, just after you came out of the labyrinth and really started to share that with me. We walked so many labyrinths together. It seemed to me like there was as much, if not more, content and so forth that came to you in this particular walk than maybe some of the other ones that we have. Would you say that that's true?
I would say that it's in large measure.
In large measure,
yeah.
true. Yeah. Yes, and just in terms of our experience with walking with them. One of the things that really struck me, and I didn't mention this afternoon when we were there, but one of the things that struck me was that when I did one of my major dreams with this same process, which we didn't speak about that yet, but when I did one of my major dreams with this process, as I was walking in, I just sort of seeing a little bit of a correlation that the labyrinth became, it seemed to fit it so well to me. It just seemed like there's this organically, somehow the labyrinth and the content of my dream seemed to fit together so well. And I remember thinking after that particular dream how, well gosh, this dream really was really suited well to be in the labyrinth, but maybe not every dream would work well for that. But you took this dream in, and so then I was intrigued to see how the labyrinth sort of, a similar thing happened to you where the labyrinth became a snake. So as we continue with this process, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that unfolds. But it did also seem really clear to me how your experience really spoke loudly to the co-creative paradigm, and how your autonomous processes really were looking for that, it just kind of came right alive. Your autonomous processes were very eager to jump right in the labyrinth with you there. So, do you have any other closing thoughts?
No, we just might share with the viewer that our intention now is to incubate this further,
Right.
and see if anything else will further unfold.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.